Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M. Teac, and friends, where we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. This is episode 32, where my guest advocates for a shift in how literacy is assessed and taught to better reflect the rich cultural backgrounds of Black boys. Our conversation highlights the necessity of centering Black boys' perspectives and experiences in educational practices to foster their authentic selves and promote their well-being. Furthermore, although Black male teachers serve as critical role models for Black boys, we discuss the importance of recruiting Black male teachers who are connected to the communities of Black boys. We would like to begin by shouting out the cities, suburbs, and villages of our newest listeners. We have new listeners in Lake City, Minnesota, Williston, North Dakota, Richmond, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Stillwater, Oklahoma, Waconia, Minnesota, McChesney Park, Illinois, High Point, North Carolina, Diamond Bar, California, Attleboro, Massachusetts, and Robbins, Iowa. Our audience is growing, y'all, and we know it's because of word of mouth. Thank you. We appreciate y'all for pressing play and listening in your car, at the gym, on your walk, wherever. Please continue to share this podcast with others. Additionally, I want to shout out one of our listeners with the Instagram handle Joy Team, and that is no other than the magnificent LAUSD 5th grade teacher and poet, Miss Stacy Joy, who commented, "Anyone who is teaching or in the life of Black boys should listen." Applause emoji, applause emoji, applause emoji on our post about last week's episode 31, The Gathering, part 1 of our current series. We agree, Miss Joy. Thank you. Two of our YouTube listeners also commented on last week's episode. One listener with the handle the_pillow_fort wrote, "Listening from Puerto Rico. Lovely to catch a growing channel in its beginnings." Hey, Puerto Rico. Thank you for supporting us as we grow. We're so happy to have you in our space and as a part of our audience. And another listener with the handle Passion84, God Always, wished us a happy Black History Month, and we say same to you. In fact, happy Black History Month to all of our listeners, because we're going to represent on this podcast, okay? This episode is the book interview, part 2 of our Black Boy Masculinities play, Literacies, and Black Male Teachers series. To start from the beginning of the series, go to episode 31 and listen all the way through. We don't want you to miss any part of this powerful series. And you know it's powerful because listen to the comments that people have made. Today, we will be interviewing our inspiration for this series, Dr. Nathaniel Bryan, author of the book Toward a Black Boy Crit Pedagogy, Black Boys, Male Teachers, and Early Childhood Classroom Practices. Dr. Nathaniel Bryan is an associate professor of early childhood education in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Texas, Austin. Dr. Bryan is also the recipient of the 2020 Emerging Scholar Award from the American Educational Research Association's Special Interest Group, Critical Perspectives in Early Childhood Education, and received an honorable mention for AERA's Division K's 2024 Early Career Award. His scholarship focuses on the investigation of 3 interrelated research ideas: the constructed identities and pedagogical styles of Black male teachers in early childhood education, the lived schooling realities, critical literacy development, and childhood play experiences of Black boys in early childhood education, and teacher preparation for urban early childhood education to better address the academic and social needs of Black boys. In his pivotal book, Toward a Black Boy Crit Pedagogy, Black Boys, Male Teachers, and Early Childhood Classroom Practices, Dr. Bryan introduces Black Boy Crit Pedagogy, an intercurricular framework that acknowledges and contests anti-Black misandry in the early childhood experiences of Black boys and provides them educational experiences that are grounded in their lived realities and those of their Black male teachers. Building from Black critical theory and Black male studies, as well as through portraits of Black boys and Black male teachers, Bryan articulates Black boy play, literacies, and masculinities as critical practices in education. Applying portraiture methodology, Bryan delves into the complexities of Black boyhoods and Black masculinities among Black male teachers. It is his hope that, and I quote him here, "This book helps us value the pedagogical practices of Black male teachers and, more importantly, Black boys' perceptions of teaching and literacy practices in early childhood classrooms." listeners. Okay. Let's listen in on our conversation. Yes, hello. I already told you that I love your hat.
Thank you. Thank you. This hopefully will allow me to appear as less than an academic.
Yeah. You're beyond the academic, okay? That's what it is. And I just want you to know that I have had your book for, I think since it came out, and I always like, I have to have this book on the show. I have to have this book on the show. And because of the way I space them out and it's people of color, so, sometimes I do different groups and all of that. I'm just so happy that I was like, I have to finally start off the year with this awesome book. I have a stack of books that I want to have on the show, and yours has been in this pile for a while. So I'm so happy to yes, finally.
I appreciate that. When you invited me, I was like, I need to reread this book because I forgot what I wrote. It's been so long ago.
I know. Yeah, it's funny because everybody says that. They're like, yeah, because I'm not interested in the newest book.
Right.
I'm more and sometimes they're new, but what's the conversation that I feel like we need to be having? But I also have to give you your flowers because I just remember. So this came out in 2022. I'm going to tell you what I remember about you in 2022. I remember being at ARA and I was in such a low place. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if I just had a lot going on or just the stress of tenure track and trying to figure out things and living in a different place. And you spoke into my life.
Oh, wow.
You pulled me to the side and said that I'm going to be great and I'm this, that. And Nathaniel, I just have to tell you, Dr. Brian, that I will never forget that.
Oh, wow. I don't even remember that.
But you did. You must have saw something in my little face.
Wow.
And you was like, let me talk to this girl, get her together.
Well, isn't this what the work is about?
Yes.
Being able to recognize where people are and being able to pull them up from whatever they may be struggling with or facing, I think that's the foundation of our work, or at least it should be.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be. And we should be looking out for each other. And, I think that's why I'm very intentional. There's some people that I know and some people I don't know, but I really like to invite folks that I not only do I admire your work, but you're also very relational because I'm a very relational person.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate studies of Black boyhood that the authors or the scholars that do it really engage in a relational type of way, because then in focusing on Black boys, you are helping all Black people. You are thinking and considering all Black people and we need you to focus on Black boys. You know what I mean? And that's fine. Just I do Black girlhood, right? And we need those, if you're really moving from love and care.
I get you. I totally understand. I'm so glad that you said that, because oftentimes when we have conversations about Black boys, people often tend to believe that we're excluding Black girls or other marginalized children. But you said it, when we talk about Black boys, we uplift everybody, right? And I think we have to normalize discussions of Black boys, understanding that this benefits all marginalized children.
Right. And it's okay to just focus on Black boys, just like sometimes it's okay to just focus on Black girls.
Absolutely.
And I feel like people who, what I found in my experience with, and I'm thinking back to being a classroom teacher, even though some of us, we did a program with Black girls, the Black boys loved us. If you are focusing on Black boys or Black girls and the other gender or whatever, or transgender or whatever, don't fool with you. You ain't doing the work, honey.
You're not doing the work. Absolutely. You're not doing the work. Absolutely.
If they don't fool with you, right? So if they fool with you and they still feel love from you, even though you focus on this, you all right.
All right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That's an important consideration.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to get started with my questions with this book. So, I got to reread this book because it was so much in here. Let me tell y'all something. Everybody that's out there, Dr. Brian, he got about 5 different frameworks in here in this one book. Terms and concepts. I said, oh, I could use that for this. Oh, I'm going to have to come back to that. And I could use this for this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I feel like it is too much, right?
No, it's not too much.
I'm oftentimes wondering, how do early childhood teachers receive so many of these frameworks, right? Given that there's so much compiled in one book. And I was like, maybe there needs to be a part 2 or, something to help people really go deeper into a particular concept that is introduced, rather than having so many introduced at one time. Yeah.
I mean, you could always, go, take one and do another work with it. We will read it. But I like that because, I don't want to start off with a critique, but what I appreciated is with your work is that there's a lot of different layers, and I want that from Black boyhood work. You know what I mean? I want it to be this complex
Right.
understanding in these different layers, and also that you're really dealing with the gender aspect and the male. Sometimes when I hear, and I've critiqued, even Black girlhood stuff too, not just that, but like Black boyhood, I'm just like, how is that different from just Black people? Like, because there is something very particular to the combination of being Black and a boy,
Right.
that we have to talk about in those ways. I want more of that. Like, what I appreciate about your work is I want more of that when I hear about Black boyhood work, because I feel like if we don't do that,
Right.
it's not, we're going to miss the unique needs of Black boys.
Absolutely.
When we don't also deal with the gender, like it's just the Blackness. And then it's like, well, how is this not just Black people? And it's like, there's something very specific to Black boys that we need to be talking about.
I like what Dr. T. Hassan Johnson calls it, like flat Blackness. Like when we don't talk about the complexities of Black boyhood or girlhood, we are really leaning into flat Blackness as if all Black people have the same kinds of experiences. So when I was writing this book, and the reason that I made it as complex as it is because Black boys are complex, and we have to lean into that complexity.
Yeah. And another thing that I love is that this is focused for early childhood educators, because I want them to have these complex thoughts, because I do feel like, and not their fault all the way, but I do feel like a lot of it gets very dumbed down.
Yes.
With everything with early childhood. I remember I was teaching a course and somebody asked me, I'm glad she asked this question. So, and I told her this because I would rather her be honest than sit up there and just be smiling in my face. But when I was like trying to push around critical literacies, and she wasn't really understanding what I meant by critical literacies. And it's a literacy course. We all teach these literacy courses. That's methods courses. And she was like, well, so it has to be negative for me to do it. And I'm just like, well, why do you see this as negative?
Right.
And also, like, let's talk about that. Let's talk more about that. And I think sometimes, this is not in my questions, but it's coming up because I just read the book. But like, even like how you're like, what you say, you make a brief commentary, a paragraph about like developmentally appropriate practices, and how even though in the definition, it's like, it's supposed to include the knowledge and the culture of the child is usually based on white children. But even how that term is weaponized to stuff that, like, I will often bring up like, oh yeah, development. Well, let's look at their anti-bias goals that they have, right? Right? From the National Association for the Education of Young Children, right? It is like, even the way that term is misused.
Exactly.
But I like how you're even problematizing it even further, right? But like, that's not even used. And when you talk about like, it's this innocence that our Black boys particularly don't get, right? When you ask that question of, how did I start off as this brilliant baby, right? They're cute babies. They all want to get in their face when you take them out in the street when they're babies, right? Exactly. They're so cute. They're this, they're smart, they're that. Then they wind up being like these struggling readers or problems or violent and all. And it's like, what are you talking about? Characterized as violent, positioned as violent. I want to be clear about that. I just got all these thoughts.
No, that's good. I'm glad you brought up this discussion about developmentally appropriate practices. And, and I think Macy has done somewhat of a good job of helping us to think about, diversity, equity, inclusion when we consider DAP, but it doesn't go deep enough, right? It doesn't speak to anti-Blackness in the ways in which early childhood is basically informed and influenced by anti-Blackness, right? And so what my work attempts to do is not only speak to that anti-Blackness that needs to be the central focus of even considering a developmentally appropriate practices, but we need to think about what scholars call, particularly Black male studies scholars call, anti-Black misandry, right?
Yes.
Which is the core or the heart of what happens pedagogically and curricularly in early childhood spaces, right? So we do have to lend this critical lens on developmentally appropriate practices, because it does not include the needs, the emotionalities of Black children, and particularly Black boys.
And saying that, you flowing right into my questions. I love it. For our audience, right? Because I'm always trying to make these conversations more accessible to people who are not in the academy. That's the purpose of the podcast, right? So that we're, families, teachers that's in everyday classrooms and all this, we do want y'all to go get this book, which you heard that in the intro. But for our audience, can you explain to us what anti-Black misandry, what it is exactly, and why it's important for us to understand this when working with Black boys, and not just as teachers? I'm always thinking about, like, I grew up in a Black church. I'm thinking about in our communities. I'm thinking about even us, even Black people. Like, so why is it important for us to think about that? And what is it first? Because I want people to...
Right. And so when we hear scholars use the term anti-Black misandry, to break it down in very simple terms, it's really to think about the ways in which systems, schooling practices are centered on this disdain, disgust, this dehumanization of Black boys. And oftentimes, anti-Black misandry is so normalized, it's not easily detected, right? And so teachers who are engaged with Black boys in classrooms don't oftentimes consider how they are complicit in this disdain, disgust, and this dehumanization of Black boys, right? So it's structural, it's institutional, it's even embedded in our schools. And so we have to pay particular attention to the ways in which Black boys are being dehumanized in early childhood spaces, right? And so again, when thinking about this notion of anti-Black misandry, think about the institutional and structural ways Black boys are simply being marginalized and dehumanized in educational spaces.
Thank you. And I need that term. I was like, I should know this term. Why I don't know this term? That's why I really appreciate your work, because I do feel like it's the both and, it's not the flattened Blackness and the people you cite. Like, they're talking about the both and. Okay, so you told us what it is. Why is this? I think there are people who think they, even myself included, right? I'm not even trying to say like that we think we get this and we don't really, and we need to go deeper, which is what your book is calling us to do in different ways. Why is this important for us to understand and to make sure we really deeply, which is what you're pushing us to understand this when we are working with Black boys in any space?
Right. And I think particularly considering early childhood education, we understand that those early years are very formative, right? And if we're going to provide the kinds of opportunities that Black boys deserve, we have to have this conversation about anti-Black misandry in order to overhaul the ways it shows up in our schooling practices and the ways it shows up in early childhood education in particular. And I think all teachers are willing and wanting to see changes for Black boys. And like I said earlier, oftentimes when we engage in anti-Black misandric practices, they're oftentimes unintentional. We are unintentionally engaging in these practices. So the purpose of the book is to bring awareness in terms of how anti-Black misandry show up in classroom spaces so teachers can overhaul it and provide the opportunities that Black boys deserve so that they can matriculate the schooling system in ways that they should, which would, I hope, lead to professional and social success. I think we do this work because we want to see our communities uplifted. We want to see Black boys uplifted. And so I think we have to be intentional in terms of identifying the ways it shows up to do something about it. I like what Dr. Marvin Lynn suggested in a foreword of the Critical Race Methodologies book. He says that we have engaged in a lot of problem posing, right? But we're not really thinking about a problem solving, right? We're not thinking about the ways that we need to develop solutions to combat this long arc of racism, anti-Blackness, and anti-Black misandry that we theorized in our work, right? And so we have to shift away from problem posing, not saying that we shouldn't problem pose,
right,
but we have to move towards problem solving, really arriving at solutions. And so my work, and then particularly in this book, I'm really thinking about how we can problem pose as well as problem solve, right? Because we're losing a generation of Black boys if we're not confronting anti-Blackness, if we're not providing solutions to curtail and to overhaul anti-Black misandry for our earliest children and our Black boys. And we know that Black boys are criminalized as early as preschool. So we see the data that suggests that there is a preschool to prison nexus that is a real thing. It's a reality, right? And so we have to think about about the ways in which anti-Black misandry is foundational to this preschool to prison nexus and do something so that we can problem solve, right? Find ways and solutions for teachers who work with our youngest children to keep Black boys in classrooms, to get the kind of academic opportunities, to arrive at the academic opportunities they deserve.
Yes, thank you for that. And I also think we don't even want them. It's so important at this early childhood level because you don't want them to become accustomed to this anti-Black misandry, because I do think it happens so young that you don't want them to think that that's who they are, right?
Absolutely.
Or that is like they're going to get in trouble. And then you wonder why kids are disengaged as they progress on because it started so young. I have so much to say, but let me.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely important to consider the ways in which Black boys internalize,
Yes.
the ways in which people position them or socially construct them, right? And so if you're hearing at a very young age that you're a bad boy, that you're dangerous, right?
Mhm.
Think about the long-term impact and consequences of hearing those pathological ways that people view you, right?
Yep.
So we have to interrupt that, right? And have to think about ways that we can build up, uplift, right? To
Yes.
draw on asset-based kinds of framework to really build the spirits of Black boys. Bettina Love and Patricia Williams talk about the spirit murders of Black children, Black and brown
Yes.
children, right? And so we have to think about the ways in which spirit murder happens in early childhood spaces, particularly considering Black boys. So we can interrupt that.
Yes.
We have the power to interrupt that, to create early learning spaces that value and acknowledge Black boys' cultural ways of knowing and being.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think are the most misunderstood aspects of studies of Black boyhood and Black male teachers?
That's a really good question because we just talked so much about Black boys. I want to talk about Black male teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and in the book, I describe this recruitment and retention narrative as an anti-Black misandric practice, right? And so what I mean by that is that there's an intentional recruitment and retention effort for Black men teachers to really uphold these white male heteropatriarchal kinds of ways of knowing and being. So we oftentimes intentionally recruit Black male teachers to keep Black boys in line, right? To serve as disciplinarians and role models. And what we have to understand is that way of thinking really comes out of a pathological ways of viewing Black boys, right? Because we think they're out of control, we have to have a Black man in a classroom to keep them in or under control, I should say, right? So that's the research that I'm trying to challenge, particularly when we think about Black male teachers. They're more than disciplinarians. They're more than role models. No, they are pedagogues, culturally relevant and gendered pedagogues who are able to teach Black boys in ways that honor their full humanity. And so when we think about this recruitment and retention work, Grow Your Own in particular, we really have to critique and be critical of this deficit or pathological construction of the Black male teacher. We have to see them again as people who are able to work with Black boys in ways, again, that honor their full humanity. And also, thinking about the research on Black boys, we have to see Black boys as brilliant, right? Black boys are brilliant, right? And so much of the research has highlighted what Black boys cannot do or what they haven't done. But as you saw in the book, these were 5 and 6-year-old Black boys who were able to articulate, right, what they wanted in terms of a Black male teacher. How often do we hear the voices of Black boys, particularly as young as 5 and 6-year-old in research, right? And so when we lean into that brilliance, right, and we continue to see Black boys as brilliance over the course of their educational lives, what a difference that would make in our educational system and even in the lives of Black boys.
Oh my gosh.
Why do I feel like I'm preaching, right?
I like when you are a preacher, so you just got to deal with that. Well, you preached to me in 2022, so I already knew what it was. it's just touching me so much because I can't believe that you got 6-year-olds. Like, and not because Black boys aren't brilliant, but because they're so young. It's hard to get really young children to talk. And I think that's why people shy away from, like, you know, usually they like middle people. Some people don't even like doing studies with 9 and 10-year-olds, let alone. And you were with these 6-year-olds, and they can articulate and they can critique the education that they have received at 6 years old, 5 and 6 years old. You know,
it wasn't an easy process. I had to use a lot of playful strategies, I call them, to really engage them into the research process. And I was supposed to write about this like a few years ago.
Please write about it.
To doing it, but it really took a lot of effort to get them to answer the questions that I was posing, right?
Yes.
So people look at the work and think it was an easy process. It was not easy at all. You know,
no.
It's really, really hard. And I think it's hard for us as researchers because of the ways that we have socially constructed children in our minds, right? We oftentimes see them as not having a voice, not understanding social political issues. So I think a lot of the issues were with me as a researcher having these challenges because of what my own personal ideologies and beliefs about children in general. So we really have to challenge ourselves to think beyond these dominant social constructions of childhood and children so that we can really see that brilliance that Black children in particular hold.
Yes. I jumped to that because you brought up, but I wanted to go back to something you said about Black male teachers, and something that I witnessed when I was a teacher in school is that because they're recruited and hired in such limited roles, not that they can't, not that they're not still doing the pedagogical work and the curricular work, because they are.
They are, right.
Then if they need support, when they don't get any support. And I feel like the problem with that is, like, I often would see, like, you're critiquing, you hired them to be disciplinarians. You only reward them when they're being disciplinarians. You only pay attention to them when they're doing that type of stuff. And then when they need support with the pedagogical aspect or the curricular, you don't offer it. And then they get in trouble, and then they're like fired or let go. And I'm just like, they can't win, because I feel like, it's such a limited, like, and I've even seen, like, I like how your book is pushing us, like, every male teacher, I worked with Black male teachers who weren't these hardcore disciplinarians. Like, that's not how that wasn't their masculinity. Absolutely. And then I felt like they were punished because they had, like, normal behavior issues that they were working through that I had. This person, hers was worse than his, but now because I actually see, and it broke my heart, like, a Black male teacher that I worked with that got let go because he wasn't keeping his class under control, which that behavior, like, I had that student the next year. That was a lot. That was a lot, like, for anybody. And it's like, you didn't offer no support to him because you looked at him as a Black man. You thought he was going to display a particular authoritarian masculinity. And then you didn't offer any support. And that wasn't his way. And I actually liked the way he was. He was more, that wasn't his, like, he wasn't that. And that's what I feel like the harm is done. It's like, or say you hire them for that, and then maybe they need support in other areas and you're not giving them support, but these other teachers, these whack teachers that are, giving them every little support that they need with this, that, and the other. And I feel like they're human, and Black male teachers are magical and they do a whole bunch of stuff. But if you just starting out teaching, you still need support like anybody else needs support. And I'm saying a lot, but I feel like that's what I saw. And then it's not fair. And then we lose them, or it's just, I just think it's harmful, and I think it's, like, unfair, because I feel like they don't get, we talk about this with Black women teachers, but I think it's a different thing that happens with Black male teachers, because I think they're one of very few, if not the only one. So you may not really feel comfortable going to people and being vulnerable and be like, hey, could you support me in this way? And you're not given the space to do that, right? And you might, sometimes older Black women teachers will be helpful, a little bit, but that's older. What if you don't have an older Black woman teacher? Me and you, we the same age. I'm figuring I'm I might have been here like last year, you came this year, like, so I do, it just breaks my heart. Some things just bring me to like tears a little bit because I do remember seeing these situations happen and them being very heartbroken at the end of it. And this is why we lose. I mean, all over we lose Black men educators because of stuff like this. They can't win. It's like, what do you want from them? Like, you act like you're afraid of them, right? And so then when they display these other masculinities that are not in these stereotypes or whatever, then you don't like that. It's like, what do you want?
You actually want. And I think Amber Pampon and Ashley Woodson and even Ed Brockenbrough, they do a really great job of helping us to understand the need to challenge these heteropatriarchal kinds of norms and expectations, really helping us understand the value of honoring multiple masculinities, right? When we think about Black male teachers, and you're absolutely right. It's like a double-edged sword. We are creating a kind of educational space for Black male teachers that really suggests that you don't belong here when your gendered ways of knowing and being do not align with those dominant, hegemonic masculinities. You're absolutely right. Yeah. But I think it really starts as early as pre-service teacher education programs. We look at it and see the ways in which it plays out in schools. But I think those expectations, those hegemonic masculine expectations start as early as pre-service teacher education programs, where even teacher educators may weed out Black men who do not display these hegemonic masculinities. So we have to continue to monitor and think through the ways in which the need to prioritize hegemonic masculinities, these dominant masculinities, impact who becomes a teacher and who doesn't.
Oh, I still ain't even get to my third question because the conversation.
We might need a part two.
And listen, because I'm just like, okay, so this I absolutely love. I love how you problematize role model.
Yes.
As the notion that Black boys, because it's often used as this idea that Black boys are in need of role models more than any other group.
Yes.
Right. Even that My Brother's Keeper initiative, like it's really stemmed in Black boys need to be fixed. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's a deficit perspective. But at the same time, you still acknowledge like, yeah, okay, they do benefit from having Black men teachers, like as role models with a capital R and M for how you're defining it. Right. Who believe in them, see their assets, employ pedagogical and schooling practices that draw from Blackness and maleness, right? And are connected to Black communities. I really appreciate how you said that. I'm gonna get into this because I got something to say, but I feel like I have so much to say about everything. But it's such a good book and it's bringing up so many things for me. I know it will for listeners. Okay, so the part that you bring in about how they have to be connected to Black communities.
Yes.
And I think this is important because not any Black man can serve as an effective role model, right? Just like not any Black, like all our skin foids, and that's not just Black men, Black people, period, right? Are not our people, right? I think this is very important for everyone who does these Black boy programming, even when you're recruiting Black men to work in Black schools, either as principals or whatever, like make sure they're connected to Black communities. Make sure that they're not anti-Black. Make sure that they see the potential in Black boys, right? And even when we're in these Black programs, a lot of people do, you might have listeners who do like nonprofit things and they're doing all that. Don't just pick Black men that you feel have these like particular measures of success, right? So they'll pick the Black men that, well, he's a lawyer and he's a this, and that's great. We want them to see, like you said, we want them to see that there are a lot of possibilities for you, right? And Black men teachers display that, right? That there are a lot of, but if that's the only benchmark, right? That's what I see a lot in a lot of these programs. And I even had an experience with someone who was an administrator and they were not connected to Black communities. Like they were actually pretty anti-Black. Like a little Black boy was walking my class through the hallway and our new Black male principal came, and a little boy, he was like 5 and he just saw this tall Black man and he went up to him and he went like this. Like, and I'm like, do you know what this little boy sees in you?
Absolutely.
He would never run up to me like that. Absolutely. He's like, and I think like that is so important that we understand the difference between that. And it's not that they're problems. It's not, we could talk about like, even when you say like, I appreciate, and I'm still working through this because I got, I be doing Black feminism and stuff. And I'm trying to understand all of this stuff and put it in a perspective because at the end of the day, I'm for the humanity of Black people, period. Absolutely. But the whole notion of Black boys need role models and they need father figures is the assumption that they don't have fathers in their lives or they don't have other people who are fathering, right?
Exactly.
And that they're going to potentially grow up to then become absentee fathers. Like it's all of these, and so what you guys say about that? Because I'm just thinking, I don't even got a question. I'm just thinking.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I believe that anytime we interview, particularly as school administrators, teacher educators, anytime we interview a Black male teacher to consider teaching in a particular community, I think the first question we should ask is, what is your connection to this community, right? Because who are the key players in this communities? And I believe if they cannot give you an adequate response, right, they should not be hired for that particular community, right? I do think that we need to tap into Black males from those communities to serve as teachers and role models for their particular communities. And I know that Grow Your Own initiatives are very successful in terms of recruiting Black and brown teachers to classrooms. But I do think that education should be in the hands of those who are part of the communities, right? And so any kind of Grow Your Own teacher model should be a community-based kind of program or initiative to ensure that we're recruiting role models and teachers from that community. I grew up in an urban space in Charleston, South Carolina. So as a teacher, I had an opportunity to teach at the high school that I attended. And that was just such a rewarding experience for me because I was invested in that community because I came from that community. And so it was highly likely that I would not do any harm to those children from that community, right? And so we have to do a better job to ensure that we are growing people from the community to serve in the capacity of Black male teachers are role models, or even to be a part of these initiatives such as My Brother's Keepers, right? Because I do think as one from the community, you know how to safeguard the children from the anti-Black misandry or anti-Blackness that they may experience in their lives, right?
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. We have to lean into more community-oriented practices when we recruit and retain Black men to classrooms. Right?
Yes, this is just, thank you. You got me, like, I
I
just have so much to think about. And I'm like, I have to reread this when I do my Black girl and stuff. I got to reread this. But but I did want to get into you. I'm just trying to pull up so I can have the book. You got so much in here, Dr. Bryant. I got to honor your work right. And I'm going to just turn to the page so I don't miss anything. I really wanted to make sure I leave time to really talk about Black boy crit pedagogy. So the one that I wanted to talk about, I think we talked a lot about like making sure we consider like Blackness and maleness and diverse expressions of masculinity. That is a part of Black boy crit pedagogy. We didn't talk about the curricular nature of it a little bit, but anti-Black misandry. I want to talk about seeing Black families and communities as informants.
Absolutely.
And you know what's funny? My Black male teachers that I worked with, I feel like they got that so deeply.
Wow.
I never thought about that like as a skill. Like they even would teach me, like they was older than me. I had 2 Black male teachers that were like more experienced and they're longer.
Right.
And the way I saw them like talk to families and be with families, and like that was such an example for me from them. Like I'm gonna shout out Mr. Baxter and Mr. Gatley. Like they used to be like, Mr. House was like, hey, come here, young lady. Now what you got to do with the kids is now his mother, she worked this time and you got to make sure. I was like, okay, Mr. Gatley, as a new teacher, right? But I feel like the Black male teachers, I saw that a lot.
Absolutely.
As an example from them. So
exactly. And I think, you're absolutely right. I think Black male teachers, because I can even recall as early childhood, even a high school educator, really leaning into that Black wisdom, right? Oftentimes that came from Black mothers, Black single mothers, right? Really holding space for them to share their perspectives on how to interact with their Black boys, right? And that to me, it says everything about you as a professional, right? Everything about what you think is important and whose voices you think are important in terms of educating Black boys, right? So, and the teachers that I highlight in the book, they were intentional about listening to those Black mothers, right? Taking suggestions from those Black mothers to educate their Black sons. They even involved them in ways that they should so-called discipline the Black boys. And the mothers would be open to sharing that wisdom, right? Because they understood that this Black male teacher was really invested in the well-being of their sons. So they wanted to do everything in their power to ensure that they were providing suggestions that would be helpful and beneficial to their sons and the Black male teacher in the classroom. I can recall one of the teachers having what he called a family night, where he met with those families outside of the schooling context monthly, just to learn more about what was happening in the lives of the families as well as the lives of the Black boys. So I do think you're absolutely right. Black male teachers have this, I don't know what to call it, they have this thing that they know how to really center the voices, the perspectives, and the wisdom of Black family members. And not only biological family members, but also fictive kin, right? They understood the role of the Black pastor in the community or the Black activist, right? And they really drew on that wisdom as well to educate the Black boys that they were serving during the time of the study.
And I just wish everyone could read this part about like the relationship between Black male teachers and Black mothers, single mothers, because I know you, my social media friend, you know, I'm always going off on people like critiquing single Black mothers. Like, I just feel like they just get the brunt of everything. And I feel like your book is like even a counter narrative to that. Like, it's not like these boys are doomed because they have they're only in the house with a mother. Like, I tell people, I grew up in a single, you know, with a single mom. My father was not a deadbeat. He was, you know, in my life. He didn't live in the house, but I do think like, I don't feel like I turned out horrible. You know, like, I feel like it's this thing. I had my uncle. I had also this like absentee father, like in the places that my father wasn't there. I had uncles. I had my cousin, my big cousin, Jesse. I think like there are other men who step up in fathering in our village, in our community, that would suggest that Black men are just not automatically not fathers. You know what I mean? Or don't father or don't want to father. And I think they tend to, my experience, I do think that Black men tend to, the ones who understand fathering more will step up more. They may not say nothing to him, but they will try to come in and do certain things and be like, okay, well, you know, he not, let me come in and let me come in and do this type of stuff. But I do think like the way you're describing like how and how these, like, you see on social media, like, you know, all of this, like they blame Black mothers for everything, but how these Black men teachers honored and respected and valued these, and didn't blame these mothers for being single or blame anybody. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's they fault and it's all this stuff. That's what I see all the time. And this is such a counter narrative that I think is so beautiful and more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're right. There's this tendency to vilify Black mothers, right? Black single mothers, right?
Of boys,
right? And I'm a product of a Black single mother. And so I know, you know, the wisdom and the insights that Black mothers hold. And I understand as a Black male educator, the importance of valuing and honoring that wisdom, right? My father died when I was 6 years old. So my mom was responsible for raising my brother and sister and I. So I know the power of a Black single mother, and we've all done really great things professionally, right? And so, and I never thought about it that much in terms of the book, but about how I really provided a counter narrative to Black single motherhood, right? Yeah, but that comes through, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and how these Black male teachers are not against them. Like, it's always like this. I mean, we do see that in pop culture a lot, but there's something special about being a teacher. And being a Black male teacher, and being in schools and being in the everydayness of being with kids and children and hearing about their families and working with these families, whether it's the grandmother, whether whoever, the uncle, the grandfather, whatever, to kind of like surround these kids in what they need, that gives you a different insight. Like, I can't imagine Black male teachers saying those same type of things. You know what I mean? That we see in pop culture that's said all the time. And I think it's because there's just something special about being a teacher, I feel like, that gives you a particular insight and understanding of kids, of all different types of kids, all different types of families, and Black boys in particular, that it's just not like that. Like, you know, and even it's funny because some of my but I used to have it wasn't early childhood, but I had an all boy, they separated them by gender. And I had an all boy homeroom a few years. And some of them, when they were in 7th and 8th grade, and some of them are still my friends now. And when they see me going off on my Black feminist stuff, they be liking it. They be like, yes, because I love them. You know what I mean? Like, they be like,
Right.
They be like, oh, but I do think like it's having that. I didn't have brothers in the house, it was just me, my sister. So I
Right.
was like, and they just have a lot of, the boys that I had
Right.
a lot of energy. They were great though. They were all into the lesson.
Right.
And so I just couldn't, when I first started teaching, I was like, I don't know how to like handle them. They would get excited, like you teaching about history, and they would stand up and be like, what? The girls would be like, the boys would be like, you mean to tell me they bombed and they using their whole bodies and da da da. I was like, yeah, that's what happened, right? And so I had these wonderful principals that they was like, you gonna get better with just having boys. So they gave me all boy homeroom so I could get better. And it was the best thing that they ever did, because I think they were always labeled as like the bad class, and they were not. These boys was goofy. When I tell you these boys they wasn't fighting, they was goofy, they was playing around, they was brilliant, smart, and I'm just like, you think these boys is bad?
Right.
They goofy. They not bad.
Right. Exactly.
And they would walk, and it's that play. That's why I like what you're saying about play, because I feel like they can't even play. Like it was just like they were so wonderful. Like they came to my wedding. They were just like so like wonderful and cool and played me all the time, made jokes and and it was fun. But then really into the lesson, like whatever you taught was like very responsive. Right. And I used to be like, oh, okay.
I really appreciate the way that you hold space for them to be their authentic selves. Like we talked about earlier, some of that kind of playfulness, those reactions are criminalized, right?
Yep.
And so most teachers don't allow Black boys to be their authentic selves. So when teachers are brave enough to allow Black boys to be their authentic selves, you get to see the best of Black boys, right? And we need to, again, hold space for Black boys to be their authentic selves,
And even what you said about that one teacher who, I don't know if it was Mr. Tall, how people would like look in his classroom, look and act like it was like out of control.
Yes.
And it wasn't out of control. Like it was I hate that.
Yes. He was engaging in very innovative practices, valuing and honoring Black boy cultural ways of knowing and being, right? And people don't know how to do that because of the ways in which Black boys' bodies are read before they even enter the classroom space, right? And so we can rid ourselves of those pathological images, right? And allow Black boys to be their authentic selves. We can see a totally different kind of educational system and outcomes for Black boys.
Yes. And it's fun. I had so much fun with them. Like, I don't know. I had so much fun with them and it was just so fun. But I did see, because I taught at a K through 8 building, I think this is important. What you're talking about is like how they went from being like cute and adorable to like by the time they got to me, they're a threat.
Right.
And I used to be like, Damari?
Right.
Damari will hold your books and tell you a joke. Like, what? Like, what? Why are you threatened by him? Like, it was really sad. That used to break my heart. And it does start in early childhood, right? Okay, so one thing I want to say, I got 2 more questions.
Oh, yeah.
I have more, but I'm only going to ask you 2. So this one, how can we do a better job of centering the well-being of Black boys and Black male teachers, but Black boys that's not simply a response to their misbehavior? So like you see these articles, you see people getting grants and they using terms like well-being, they're using trauma and all of this, but it still to me feels very deficit. It still see Black boys as a problem to me.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't, and I think that's why people get grants when they do stuff like that, because it's still at the end of the day, it's still seeing them as violent.
Exactly.
As a problem, as uncontrollable and all of that. And so how can we do a better job of that that's not at the end of the day still steeped in, anti-Blackness, anti-Black misandry, just so deficit and so negative.
Right. To be honest, and I think this book even alludes to this, really allowing Black boys to lead the way, right?
Yes.
Really listening, hearing, and understanding Black boys and stop guessing or assuming what Black boys need, right? I think Dr. Cesare Warren does a beautiful job of talking about empathy, right? And empathy is this idea of taking the perspectives of those who are being considered, right? And so how are we holding space to be empathetic towards Black boys, where we are allowing them to share their perspectives and their beliefs and their ideologies as a way to guide our practice as educators, right? So really allowing Black boys as early child education education to lead the way. Step back, put aside our own personal agenda, and allow Black boys to center their own agenda. And I think that when we start listening, hearing, and understanding Black boys, I think we'll see, again, a different kind of educational system that really honors and values Black boyhoods.
Yes.
Yeah.
I should have made that my last question. But this one should have came before. But I do want to say something about literacy because it's such an important part of the book, and a group that we're going to have come on later is dealing with that. How would you, so I really appreciate how you're like, so you talk about these narrow ways, you know, I'm literacy too, but specifically to Black boys in your work, how even when we look at these statistics about like them being behind and comparing them to white students and all of this, like it's not necessarily accurate, right? It's not, it's so narrow, it's so limited. And even in terms of how we assess the literacy abilities of Black boys. And so how could we reimagine literacy assessments to more holistically and accurately show Black boys' reading abilities and the range and the richness and the depth?
I think we have to decenter, and particularly in early childhood education, this notion of literacy normativity that really prioritizes phonics, phonemic awareness, these very narrow, as you described, ways of thinking about literacies, right? Black boys are literate, right? And they display these literacies in varying ways that teachers aren't accustomed to honoring and valuing, right? And so David Kirkland talks about Black masculine literacies, which a lot of what I did in the book is to extend that conception to really honor the literacies that Black boys bring to early childhood education, right? Black boys are engaging in rap, hip hop, rap battles, and all of these things that are not oftentimes considered literacy practices, but they are literacy practices. And if we hold space in early childhood classrooms to honor that rich linguistic history, that those rich linguistic practices that Black boys already possess, and then assess them in the ways that they show up, that those literacies show up, then we can overhaul literacy normativity, or our intention on upholding these literacy practices that require Black boys and other children to divorce themselves from their literacies and their literate ways of knowing and being. So really thinking about how to honor the literacy practices from Black communities that Black boys already uphold, that they already have, and holding space in early childhood classrooms to honor that. And I know many early childhood teachers kind of frown at that because they're so accustomed to, you know, drawing on developmentally appropriate practices, which even determines how we teach literacy in schools. I'm currently working with a colleague to develop this notion of prison abolition literacies, right? To think about the ways that we can draw on the ways that Black boys understand injustices as related to the prison system and center that in our early childhood education. And all of those are Black masculine literacy practices that we need to honor in classrooms to really build on the critical consciousness and the literacy practices that Black boys bring to early childhood classroom spaces, right? So divorce ourselves from literacy normativity is the first step, and then holding space to honor the literacies that Black boys bring to early childhood spaces. Can you imagine an early childhood classroom that really centered itself on those Black masculine literacy practices? Boy, that would be beautiful, wouldn't it?
It would be so beautiful. And it would just be good for everyone. Like
everybody.
It's just because y'all gonna use our stuff anyway. Y'all use stuff from Black boys and Black girls and Black people in pop culture. Y'all make money off of it, and then we can't even display. Like that's one thing. Like I like social media, but I don't like it because I feel like everybody feels like I was teaching this class and students who can't get around these critical aspects, but then you saying something like she ate, like you know, like you don't get to say that and you can't understand critical literacies. Okay,
absolutely.
Take that out your mouth.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
they doing them dance that the athletes do, all they little dances, and that's what TikTok is made from. Black people's dances, youth, young people.
Exactly.
But y'all looking at us like this when we say anything about Black people.
Exactly. And Black children as early as early childhood education have developed literacy practices. And so we have to honor those, right? Yes. I know people often focus on Black youth and their literacies. Young Black children, Black boys in particular, also develop literacies that we can honor.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Brian.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes. You know, this book excited me because I had so much to say.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you really appreciate the book. I'm still learning to appreciate it because I'm always thinking, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. So, I
No.
think I'm harder on myself than other
Yes.
people are. I have
Yes.
to learn to live with what is already out in the world.
Yes. And this is not the only thing you're going to write. And it's not the only thing you're going to do. And it's so rich for, is this your first book?
Yeah, well, this is
Wow.
the first solo author book. I've done some co-ed volumes, but yeah, this is
your
my
first solo. Like, this is good. This is impressive in its depth and its layered.
Thank you so much.
And I know you read because you cite everybody in here. And that's why I appreciate it because I'm like that too. People be saying I be reading too much, but you done cite everybody. You was like, and then like so-and-so says, I was like, yes. Every time you, I don't know if you notice, but I would smile and be like, I love when scholars scholar. I love it.
I have to honor
Black
scholars and people who've done this work like Dr. Marvin Lynn, Dr. Anthony Brown, and all these marvelous, Dr. James Earl Davis, and all these wonderful folks who really led the way, and, I'm standing on the shoulders of those great and brilliant Black male scholars.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you. I always say this, I'm going to let you go so that if I invite you again, you'll come back. So I don't want to keep you too long.
I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope it will be beneficial to your audience.
Yes, I'm sure it will. Our audience, right?
Right.
I so enjoyed the back and forth conversational interview with my friend, Dr. Nathaniel Bryan. He stressed that anti-Blackness must be a central focus when considering developmentally appropriate practices in early childhood, while also thinking about anti-Black misandry. If we truly want to see Black boys uplifted, we have to be intentional about identifying the ways anti-Black misandry shows up, and then we must do something about it. As Dr. Bryan declared, when we allow Black boys to be their authentic selves, we get to see the best of Black boys. We must also consider the ways hegemonic masculinities impact who becomes a teacher and who doesn't. Teacher educators tend to weed out Black males who do not display these masculinities. Thus, our work to recruit and retain Black male teachers begins far before they enter the classroom. Thank you for listening to part 2 of our Black Boy Masculinities, Play, Literacies, and Black Male Teachers series. If something from this episode resonates with you, please share it with others and let us know via social media or through our website, evolvingeducationproject.com. The books and articles mentioned in this episode will be linked in the show notes. Be sure to tune in for part 3 on the Wednesday after next. Yes, we are now officially a bi-weekly show. We learned that this works better for our workflow and our very, very, very small staff. So we hope that's okay. Trust you don't want to miss it. We are committed to bringing you high quality episodes. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We are currently transitioning from X to Blue Sky. If you can only choose one, please follow us on Instagram and love all of our posts. Support that doesn't cost a dime. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you can also support us by writing a review. 5-star and favorable written reviews help more educators, organizers, families, communities, and activists find us. We hope to continue to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out.